We're done talking about gender.
Oh, thank God.
Now it's time to talk about race and Jewish
No!
Moses.
Can I get out? Can I leave? Can I exit this?
I want off Abigail Shrier's wild ride.
Hi, welcome to Cracked Ivory, a podcast about the feminist discourses in academic theory and popular culture.
I'm Talia Butt, author of Transradfem and your resident evil radical lesbian feminist.
I'm Emma Zaharouk, the blogger behind Dolphin Diaries and resident evil detrans lesbian.
Hi, I'm Lucy Kartikasari, detrans TikToker, and I detransitioned because apparently character arcs with emotional damage are really my thing.
Okay, I see. So you are the protagonist of this episode, and we are the evil witches who have dragged you here to subject you to just one of the worst books.
Yes, so today is a very special detrans episode. This and the companion Patreon episode to this podcast are both about two well-known detrans books, kind of. So, today's episode is on none other than Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, by Abigail Shrier, published in 2020.
Yeah. I'm sorry, everyone. I am the transgender craze, and I am out here seducing all your daughters. I do not apologize. I will keep doing it. Also, for the record, this is the blindest I have ever been going into an episode. I have not read the book. I have not read either book. I barely had a look at like Emma's screenshots and notes. So the only thing I'm going to be doing here is like sitting here and like pointing whenever a Janice Raymond reference comes up, because you know she's going to come up. They haven't really changed the playbook in like 50 years, but yeah.
You know, surprisingly, Raymond either isn't directly cited or isn't quoted in Irreversible Damage, or maybe she's referenced like somewhere in the dregs of the references, but I do not recall a direct quote, or if she is, it's not recurrent or frequent.
Interesting.
But I did want to ask Lucy how familiar you are with the contents of Irreversible Damage.
I only know it in like on a very surface level. I have been unfortunately introduced to the existence of this book by family members.
Oh god.
Not calling out anyone specifically, but it's just been introduced to me as like, hey, this could be you. Mind you, this happened before I detransitioned, and yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I am probably blinder than Talia going into this.
Okay.
Interesting.
Irreversible Damage is quite a widely dunked on book at this point, because it has been 5 years since it was released. As a recent UK court ruling, for instance, and the continued attack on transition in both the UK and the United States and in other places have shown, it has unfortunately not left relevance. So, before we get into the subject of the book, I feel like a degree of disclosure from my background is important, because I am a little bit kind of the perfect reader for this book. Some of this listeners that read my blog might be aware, but if you're not, I am a detrans woman, detrans lesbian specifically.
Wait, you're detrans?
I know, right? I'm sorry. I was like catfishing you the whole time.
I thought you were a cis lesbian. What the hell?
A common mistake. So I went through a very medicalized transition procedure. I am officially diagnosed with F64.0 transsexualism. I was on testosterone for about 7 years. I am from an abusive home. Anyway, how do I start with Irreversible Damage? Irreversible Damage is a deeply American suburban mother tantrum. The first thing that struck me about this book is very much a book for parents, which is very apparent to anyone that would even read the summary, but it is for the parents of trans children first and foremost. And it presents a parental anxiety about losing control of your children. It is very sensationalistic in its framing and its phrasing, and it's very much think of the things that will happen to your child kind of thing. The first two things that struck me in the very beginning of the book is, one, Shrier mentions intersectionality, which I did not expect. Intersectionality is our first episode, right?
Mhm.
She talks about it specifically as a loss of American values and a kind of making people who are higher in the hierarchy feel bad.
Okay.
Yeah, I will now read you the quote. The quote is from the end of the book, but Shrier, like a lot of conservative books, kind of repeats herself. But
Mm.
the beginning is more mellow, and the end is more unhinged and vitriolic, as you might expect. But it's the same thing, but again and worse. So
Mm.
I'm gonna read you a quote about intersectionality, and you tell me what you think about it, Natalia and Lucy. Virtually everything that transgender activists hope to achieve in the broader culture has already been achieved on college campuses. While the broader American culture endures constant flogging, LGBTQ identities enjoy a non-stop parade. The universities revile privilege and facilitate emancipation from it too. All they ask is a de minimis sacrifice to the intersectional gods. Your birth name is a good start. Ladies, thoughts?
I've never witnessed this level of catastrophizing of people just being like, I think I want to use a different pronoun and maybe dye my hair a different color.
Oh my god.
And the victimhood complex here of constant flogging of American, what was it, values?
Yes.
Lucy, were you there at the soiree last weekend when us queers marched out in a parade out of our universities and marched into the American heartland to flog suburban white women?
Missed that one,
Missed that-
fortunately.
Funny you should mention it. Oh, I just want a different name and pronouns.
Mhm.
Shrier in this book is incredibly bitter and preoccupied with specifically the idea, with the policy that if a student asks to be named a different name and refers to different pronouns, but they're not out at home, the schools. She cites California specifically. Californian schools have a policy of non-disclosure to parents, so as not to subject the student to possible transphobia at home. She goes on about this so many times, and there was a quote that basically goes something like, "Well, Shrier writes, I was told that there is no harm in it. What's the harm in calling someone what they want to be called? There is a great harm, actually, and parents have a great interest in averting it. If a child is encouraged in this way, their gender identity might be hard to change later down the line." And she specifically also cites that, stuff like, oh, the people that go on to puberty blockers are more likely to less likely to change their minds later. And there is a constant assertion, well, one, that transition is a less desirable outcome than not transitioning, but more to the
Well-
point, that parents should have all the say in who their child is and what they do, even when they're an adult.
Well, firstly, I thought that she was just sour about the fact that her name is Abigail Shrier, but more saliently, that's just narcissistic mom behavior. That's narc parent behavior, but extrapolated
yes.
to everyone.
I think it would genuinely be difficult to talk about the full extent or every facet of GC politics without actually understanding the mindset or the common patterns of abuse that the controlling parents enact, not just on children in general, but also on queer kids specifically. The way that children are seen as an investment, the way their heterosexuality, their future promised offspring are seen as something that is owed to parents, and how queerness and the quote unquote transition craze these days is specifically seen as taking something material away from parents that they are incredibly entitled over. This is a mindset that's just entirely abstracts away the autonomy, agency, and frankly the humanity of queer kids.
Yeah, and a lot of this book, and I mean a lot, volume-wise, if you were to cut these things out, it would probably remove a third of the entire text, if not more. A lot of
Damn.
them are stories of children that would go on to transition, told from the perspective of, retold by Shrier, obviously, but told from the perspective of their parents. Parents and no one else. So when it comes to, discussing this in terms of, transition, you can make no conclusions about the identity and lives of these people because they're told solely through the perspective of the parents, and as we'll get to a bit later, the framing is very particular, and Shrier, as is very abundantly obvious at the end of the book, is not above manipulating the framing and saying the same thing completely differently when it serves her ends. So about a third of this book, it basically goes like this. I'm gonna just improv a story of Shrier's parents' story, and I'm gonna put a sad violin in the background in editing. So,
Okay.
title, like, Joanna. Joanna was born in a average Midwestern household of two progressive parents, Mary and John. Sorry for the biblical choice of names, just what came to mind.
No, that's appropriate.
Mary and John were very progressive and Democrats, and they went to the same-sex wedding of their cousin's dog. They've always supported Joanna, who was a very feminine slash a tomboy slash girly girl, boy crazy, maybe liked girls sometimes. When she skidded her knee in 4th grade, they paid $5,000 to have angels blow on the skidded knee and fix her. She had very good grades, but then, in grade 7, she met a furry, or went on the internet, or went to the Gay Straight Alliance, or went to summer camp. And there she encountered Sock. Sock was trans. In mere weeks, Joanna was trans too. Her parents, at first confused, were of course supportive. I mean, they didn't use any of the funny pronouns or that stupid chosen name that she had, but they were very supportive. When she broke her leg, they paid $1 million to have the angels grow her a 3rd leg.
I thought they were against
And
transition.
then, hold on. They tried everything, putting her on a horse farm, putting her to work in the glue factory. But nothing changed her mind, even when it seemed like it did. Her parents then paid $2 billion to have her go to a premium Ivy League school. But the ungrateful bitch transitioned fucking anyway! And now, despite the $3 billion that Mary and John wasted on this barren wastrel without boobs, she won't even talk to them! And that's it, that's like a third of the book.
Oh, that's bleak.
That is bleak, yes. Were
Yeah,
furries actually
I-
mentioned? I'm sorry. I know we should be saying intelligent things, but like that is my only takeaway currently. Were furries actually mentioned in the book?
Yes, actually, yes.
Oh my
This is the-
god.
Okay,
No.
like, I'm exaggerating, like, so in every of these stories, she emphasizes the amount of money spent on the children. Like, she puts actual numbers, obviously
my
rounded,
God.
one assumes.
Hmm.
But, like, she really, really plays up. If the parents were progressive, she will always mention that they used to be progressive. And she will always say how much money they spent on the children. So there is that. I did, like, make up the 3rd leg of and stuff like that. But,
Well, thank you for clarifying that part. We weren't sure.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, I want to like interject with a recent experience I had. I was recently called in for like a volunteering thing where I was supposed to host a Q&A session for some parents of trans kids actually.
uh-huh.
So it was me, a trans guy who had basically like gone through his entire transition, who was basically quote unquote done.
Mhm.
Us and these parents, like I want to say like maybe 35, 40 parents in a room, basically talking about like, okay, what are the potential outcomes for your kid? It's probably going to be somewhere between me, a more or less binary detrans woman, and this binary trans man, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And all of these parents, like people cried and stuff, and people were asking like, you know, thoughtful questions, and I can't imagine the thought of like so many of these parents just being like unsure, and then the thought of one of these parents picking up this book specifically just messes with my head, and I don't know, it's terrifying. I hate that this book is in circulation. I mean,
Like, the thing is that, like, Shrier is incredibly possessive of children. There are things that we'll get to a bit later that's, like, really, really, really play into parental fears of harm to children that, unfortunately, I would say that even parents that do not, as a rule, behave this way towards their children might, you know, acquire really like if they don't really know much about transition, they don't have like solid knowledge,
Mhm.
that it would be alarming enough to them that even though they may not be this possessive, they may not be this horrible towards children, but it
Mhm.
might like scare them a lot.
Yeah, and the money in particular, the fact that like she's including like actual figures, like currency totals, the
Hmm.
fact that she has
Yeah.
such an obviously like monetary, transactional view of that relationship, of that parent-child relationship straight up. I think that was the thing that stood out to me. That was the most interesting to me because, like, okay, not to slander a whole culture or anything like that, but like, that is something you will find straight out of Indian parenting. And as an
Oh,
Indian woman,
yes.
it is not a parenting style I am a fan of.
Yeah, like, here's the thing. This is something that was in my mind recently, but like people like to differentiate between, individualistic versus collectivist society, stuff like that. There are not as many differences as people sometimes might think. Patriarchal hierarchy and the idea of children being the property of parents. Because here, Shrier is extremely American, and like children are a monetary investment that they have to pay forward. And the idea of like a generational debt is like oblique and conveyed through money.
A very violently American way of like conceptualizing a toxic parenting style. Asian parents just freestyle this stuff. They won't give you a figure. They will be like, I birthed you and you owe us a life debt.
It's kind of a thing in our culture too, in Ukrainian culture and a lot of Eastern European cultures. There is constant generational debt, and you owe your parents your life to the extent that this is part of law.
Oh my god.
Elderly parents can sue children for money. If you are a child and you are not subsidizing your parents, they can, hypothetically, sue you for not doing that. You're not, like, this is not by default. No one will knock on your door and be like, hey, pay the fuck up. Like, that's not gonna happen. But if they feel unsupported by you monetarily, they can sue you and win.
Wow.
Because it's kind of a cultural expectation that children are insurance in old age, to the extent that, practically speaking, unless you're rich, and like, good rich, and you're old and you don't have children, you're fucked.
I don't know how best to compare the Ukrainian and Indian economies, but like, when like Westerners and like specifically Americans talk about this like fancy newfangled gizmo that they call a social safety net, I just kind of like squint at that and like chuckle a little bit, like, oh, that's so quaint. We don't have that. There's a reason that like our proud culture developed traditions like kick widows out onto the street. And also, once you get old enough, shouldn't you really just go to the forest and like meditate a bunch and maybe get eaten by a bear? Like, that's the Indian social safety net, being eaten by a bear.
Damn.
Pretty much. The Ukrainian social net is like, well, it's kind of different once the society greatly industrialized and urbanized, but that's relatively recent. Like, for example, in like my class at school, I was one of the only people who is second generation city born. Almost everyone's like grandparents are from villages. So basically, life insurance is that you work your patch of field until you die, and you need children to support you. That's it. It's nothing else.
Yeah, that's pretty third world.
But clearly, for all its differences, the American society is not that much changed because, albeit it is rephrased as money and the generational debt is hidden, it still holds. It's changed hats, right? It's been translated into currency. And the things that Shrier demands of daughters, children which were assigned female at birth in this case. It does not actually matter how they identify, obviously. So the thing that Shrier demands of daughters is very particular, because Shrier is deeply preoccupied with teenage sex and pregnancy. It was very weird. It happens 3 times in the book, and each time it's more explicit than the last. The first time, it's in the very beginning. She merely says, she lays out this common, like, shrieking mom kind of thing of like, these days, children have iPhones. They don't talk to each other in real life. They're super vulnerable. Blah blah blah. They don't go to malls anymore, etc. And then, just like in the next paragraph, she's like, "Well, in my time, at their age, we were like blowing boys behind Denny's. These days, teenagers don't even know what sex is like before they encounter such things as transgenderism."
Oh, good
And I'm
grief.
like, are you and like she goes on about mental illness and the current generation being more predisposed towards mental illness. And I'm like, I looked at that, and that's like, this is the beginning of the book. This is the preface. I looked at that and I was like, are you saying that the American girl should be fucked behind Denny's until she is sane? Is that what you're saying? And then, like, the answer is yes, that is what she's saying. Because she repeats it 2 more times. Actually, slightly more than 2, but, like, this specific argument repeats, notably in a way that I remember now after reading it. 2 more times is the first time she's just puts these two things side by side that imply a causal relationship but do not state. The
If you
second
could see my
time
face right
she
now.
alludes, I'm so sorry. I told you this episode was going to be disgusting.
Uh-huh.
The second time she alludes to a possible causal relationship. The third time I will read out loud to you because it's from the very end of the book,
Oh,
from
no.
a very short interview with Buck Angel that's in there for some reason.
Oh no.
Oh no, indeed.
You dropped a lot on us, girl, in a very short span of time. All right, whatever. Keep going. Hit us with it.
Okay, so Shrier writes, far be it from me to advocate teenage sex, but in the course of writing this book, I've come to view this monster differently, now that it's been so utterly defanged. For humanity's most notoriously libidinous demographic, it's hard not to see that age-old rounding of bases as a twitchy expression of joy. The carnal declaration of hope. There is a bit more of the interview, and then she goes on. Are these kids having sex, as far as Buck knows? No, he told me. They're not. Is this all an act of sexual withdrawal and avoidance? I asked him. Yes, he thought it might be. It bothers him a lot. So you see...
So Buck Angel is a porn star. We gotta,
He is. If you someone doesn't know...
I feel the need to put that out there because, look, oh my god, there's 10 things to talk about, but I'm just gonna say a quick sentence and then let others just react because I'm still kind of reeling. But the GCs are really fixated on this idea of transition, ruining orgasms, mutilating your body, just
Yeah.
just actually making your sex life unfortunate, and just aside from the fact that that's incredibly ironic to be interviewing Buck Angel porn star about how unfulfilling sex is once you transition. I can tell. I feel like the listeners of this podcast don't necessarily need to be told, but transition is a fucking performance enhancing drug when it comes to sex, if anything. Okay, just to be clear.
Lucy, how are you feeling? What's your impression?
I don't even know where to begin with this. Oh my god, I'm just okay, so the fact that it comes back repeatedly speaks to me that Abigail here, I don't know, does she have some kind of unfulfilled fantasy it has
Oh my god.
it comes across as fetishistic if you constantly bring it up. This is repeated. Your edit, I don't know if there was an editor, but if there was an editor, I want to ask this editor a lot of questions. Why does this come up so many times? And I know it's reductive to do this, but if you flip the gender, that's weird. You don't do that. My god.
Yeah, yeah. Now I don't know if either of you are familiar with Allison Bailey, and if you're not, I'm not going to tell you exactly who that is. One of the endless parade of GCs who have brought court cases against Stonewall and mermaids and blah blah blah. But Allison Bailey has this fairly notorious quote, which I'm going to ask both of you if you've heard of, talking about
I think I know the quote
yep,
that you are about to say.
the tragedy of transition, especially as it pertains to the quote unquote mutilation of young girls. She has this rather famous quote talking about the lost tits of teenage girls that will never know a lover's caress.
Sorry, I heard that sorry, that unlocked some. I've heard that quote. That unlocked some things for me. I've heard that one before.
Mhm.
Yeah, there are no words.
It's palpable, right? They associate transition with sterility, right? So the way the GCs sort of their primary psychosexual hang-up around transition is that they view it as akin to sterility. They think we're broken, irreversible damage is literally that we are literally damaged goods. We are the damaged goods made manifest, and they think that they have sort of conspiracized themselves into viewing this all as this sprawling social contagion, pharmaceutical conspiracy to just sterilize as much of America's youth as possible. I wouldn't be surprised if they're even connecting the whole falling birth rate natalist panic to us.
Not quite, but she does do the party line of
of
the
course.
medical establishment pushing medication onto vulnerable young women. The book we're going to discuss for Patreon does a little more of this, but not in the natalist sense because it's a TERF book. But yes, she kind of does do this, albeit she does not mention declining birth rates. She only mentions declining teen pregnancies.
I'm sorry, but declining teen pregnancy, I'm assuming that this woman is not data literate because, like, correlations, sure, but you can't make a causation out. Those are not causally connected.
No, but she does, because she
But-
has no intellectual honesty. She alludes to a causal line. She doesn't establish it, like in a kind of research
Well,
sense,
because
but she just
because she
says
can't
that there is
establish
one.
it. Like
Right, because it's not established.
doubt
you
she-
literally can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
doubt she either has the chops to engage in that kind of like data rigging if she must, but like, yeah, you would literally have to fabricate a lot as well. Okay. I'm actually going to tell you a very quick and interesting factoid. Did y'all know that like, okay, so we are all by this point where we're familiar with the male loneliness crisis, and we're familiar with like the resurgent natalism that the entire right wing, not just the gender criticals, are now obsessed with, and how they're lamenting the falling birth rates in the West and whatnot. Did
Mhm.
y'all know that the cause of that straight up is falling teen pregnancies? And did y'all further know the fact
Really?
that
Really?
most, yeah, and did y'all further know the fact that most teen pregnancies are caused by adult men? So the thing, just always keep this in the back of your
Not
mind.
surprising.
So like statistically,
Uh,
we know that like the falling birth rate thing and the natal and the natalist panic it is driving is because adult men have been, I guess, frankly, like I don't think it's voluntary, but they have been successfully prevented from impregnating teens as much.
didn't know that it was adult men. Not surprised by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. I guess
This,
it's nice that young women are, I don't know,
yeah, I
not being
don't know.
impregnated by. I don't even know how to say this nicely. Like,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
goodness.
no,
Lucy,
because
this is not the nice words episode. I'm sorry.
yeah, there are some
Yeah.
horrifying, and I don't know
Oh my
if we know if like the adult men are wearing condoms now or if they're actually fucking teenagers left. I don't have that answer for you. It is gonna haunt us until we die, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you're like, Emma, why are you subjecting us to this early? I'll answer you, because most of what I just said to you is in either the preface or chapter 1.
You're joking.
What
No!
the fuck? We're not even approaching what the
I just had to scrape my jaw off the ground. What?
No, really. Like, okay, the quotes that I gave you, the quotes are from the end of the book, but they repeat the sentiments that were phrased a little nicer in preface or chapter 1.
Okay.
This is
Okay,
not
so
okay.
so what else is there? So what else is there, honey?
Okay. So there is unfortunately more. These are pretty salient points, and like I said, like a lot of conservative books, she does kind of just repeat herself a lot in progressively more unhinged terms. Because, like, it's a strategy, right? In the beginning, you onboard people with milder rhetoric, less vitriol, and then either they fall off, or they read only the beginning, and they get scared and they get convinced enough. Or they go down the pipeline, and by the end of the book, they're perfectly willing to go straight up genocidal rhetoric. So that's not necessarily not on purpose, you know what I mean?
Yeah, boiling the frog.
Yeah, basically. So you asked, Talia, why would you interview Buck Angel at Trans Man Porn Star for this book? And he's, by the way, he's in the detrans segment of the book, which is at the end. So,
That's hilarious, but okay.
I'll tell you.
Huh?
I'll tell you why. Because Shrier makes a gesture in this book of not hurting the true transsexuals. She says that some people are helped by transition. Kind of, we'll get to that. Some people suffer very deeply, and to them it is a relief of a deep suffering. These people, she says, do not want to be celebrated by the queer communities. They don't want publicity. They simply want to be left alone.
Okay.
Buck Angel is one of these people, allegedly. Well, he did go through a very medicalized procedure, so like, you know, I suppose fair
So-
and square. So,
What you're saying is Shrier supports Blanchard?
oh my God, Lucy, yes, of course. Not only does she support Blanchard, Blanchard blurbed this book, and there was an entire chapter dedicated to Blanchard. Indeed, there are multiple chapters dedicated to every conversion therapy twat that exists in America or Canada, including Kenneth Zucker. Shout out if you know who that is.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Every chapter in which, I kid you not, the chapters go like this. Here is this great man of science. He has 2 billion institute. He has published 3 million articles. He has made a discovery. He discovered the AGP. But then
Oh
the
my God.
woke mob knocked on his door and took away every single institute, stole all his money, and ate his dog. How dare they insult such a great man?
You know, Blanchard wasn't that well known until the GCs fucking discovered him and turned him into their like greatest hero. Like straight up. He abused a lot of us. He did abuse a lot of us, but like the dude was obscure before you know, the GCs discovered how useful he was.
So, like, the thing that I do want to point out that Shrier has a bit of a narrative bent to her. Like, while I do exaggerate a bit, not as much as you might think. Like, when I say 3 billion institutes and third legs and angel healing, that is exaggeration. But
Thank you for clarifying.
tonally, yes, tonally, I am exaggerating very little. And the narrative framing is there. Like, that's the gist, that's the vibe. And she does give, like, when it comes to interviews, she gives, like, appearance description. Like, she sets the scene and stuff. And this is not by far not the only people that she describes, right?
I'm sorry, that's narc mom behavior. Like that textbook.
It is.
I'm
It is. And so when she describes like Zucker or Blanchard or the transphobic parents of trans children, it is saccharine. I'm surprised she managed to wipe the cum off her face for the author picture. Like,
oh my god.
but then it's quite well known at this point that she interviewed a lot of people, and she cites a lot of people, including pro-trans people, who did not know often what they were interviewing for. Some of them did, but a lot of them did not. She will describe them with varying degrees of condescension, fascination on body parts. Like, she describes Chase Ross fairly luridly, the trans man YouTuber. And it's very motivated. It's very, like, manipulative in such a way that I am impressed that she's not ashamed of herself because it's so blatant. Oh, all the people I like are these great men with just the best vibes, and I come at the sight of them. And all the people I don't like are pathetic and funny and ugly, and they talk funny, and it's like, oh, come on.
It's over, trans activists. I have already portrayed you as the soy jack.
It literally is that. And like, yeah, if you're not familiar with the GC line, that like I'm not against true transsexuals. I just don't like trans activists. This is very much the framing of this book too. So this is like the beginning of the book, right? The beginning of the book sweeps you off your feet. For good or for bad. The middle is quite boring. One, because it just keeps repeating the same teary parent story. Like, they're all different, but they're all the same. But also, it's just tediously annoying. But there is one point that I want to bring up here, and that is Shrier's relationship to the social constructivist theory of gender.
What?
Because it is fascinating.
That is not a sentence I was expecting to hear, but sure. Okay, do more psychic damage to me, honey. Why don't you? Go ahead.
Okay. So Shrier obviously speaks favorably of TERFs. TERFs, especially in 2020, right? The release year is 2020, are not much of feminists at this point. But she has a really weird opinion, I would say, of social construction of gender. I'm gonna read you a quote about it.
Okay.
And yes, this is yet another transphobe that has a bone to pick with Andrea Long Chu. Okay, quote. If women can no longer be defined according to physical characteristics or biology, how are we to define them? Prominent transgender author Andrea Long Chu has an answer. Female is a universal existential condition defined by submitting to someone else's desires. A more offensive or insipid definition of womanhood could hardly be imagined. But in order to redefine womanhood to include trans women, this sort of solution has become typical. Bereft of biological markers to explain who counts as a woman, trans activists rely on social stereotypes, many of them archaic and insulting. So, Shrier hallucinates that children are taught gender stereotypes at school. This is not an exaggeration. This is literally the text, and she repeats this over and over again. She claims that children are taught things like it's not girly to be good at sports or at maths, or it's not masculine to like literature. They are taught this at school, as in it is said to them that this is a stereotype, and they learn it. And she genuinely asserts that if they were not told this explicitly, they wouldn't know. That schools teach children that these are stereotypes, but outside of school, they would have had no idea. And so she then, after we of course arrive at the madness about trans women, she writes this little number. Young women are intruded on by biological men in locker rooms, trounced by biological boys on sports teams, and told work life will never offer them fair rewards. Intersectional language denies all their biological specialness. Hollywood,
This-
no longer in the rom-com business, offers them no fantasy on which to hang their girlish hopes. The gifts and presumptions of this culture make it hard to imagine why anyone should want to be a girl. Thoughts?
If you could see my fucking so Lucy, did you take the gender stereotype classes at high school or college? Let us know.
I think I missed that one. I think I might have just been like outside in a park when that was happening.
I see.
Man.
Didn't see him.
Were you being trounced by
Yeah.
biological boys at the time, or cybernetechnic boys, or biotechnological boys? What kind of boys were you being trounced by?
Cyborg boys. Cyborg boys.
Cyborg boys.
I mean, anime boys for me personally, I think.
Oh no, not the anime boys. All right. Emma, you cannot just where am I supposed to begin? Where am I supposed to this is like
No, so okay, let me lay the cards out on the table.
okay.
So, Abigail Shrier hallucinates that children are taught gender stereotypes at school and university. Then, girls, because they never get to be women, not even when they turn 18 and go to college, girls encounter trans women, and they are imposed on by their biological superiority. And then, because they've been led to believe that women are all these bad stereotypes, and trans women are more powerful than them, there is no conclusion but to transition. That is the thesis, among other things.
Did she
Okay.
stretch before she did all those moves? All the
So what you say? Okay. So this is the part that like reminds me of Janice Raymond, because Janice Raymond in Writing the Transsexual Empire accidentally becomes our biggest hype woman every once in a while, just sort of talking about how we have like, torn apart the natural order and like defaced the idols of man and woman and things like that. And it's just like, like all right,
badass.
I thought this was an anti-trans book. What come on, Jan. But this because like, and this reminds me of that because like Abigail Shrier is basically saying that like trans women are so powerful. We're just like so I don't know what is it. So glam, so like biologically superior that we have absolutely no choice but to send cis women, just slink to make them slink off, just pack off and like abandon their own gender because they know they can't do it like us. And it's just like,
Okay,
thanks,
but no,
Abby.
have you seen? But have you seen Hunter Schafer, or Alex Kamsani? I mean,
Okay, Hunter Schafer definitely passes better than I do.
Hunter Schafer, do you mean
Real.
Princess Zelda? This was recorded. This was recorded in April of 2025. We're gonna see how that quote ages. Anyway,
The funny thing about trans women is they're barely mentioned for most of the book. Only in the beginning, Shrier says that like there are true transsexuals, which are mostly assigned male at birth. That's what she says. So she basically says that true transsexuals, which are good, and we shouldn't hurt them because they're very sad, are mainly trans women. It's basically what she says. And then she does this whole thing of like, school teaches them gender stereotypes, and then another thing that we're going to get into that has more to do with like surgeries and stuff like that, and the trans cult and whatnot. So she does this, and then she's like, but what would motivate women to transition so much? Even though she already kind of gives the answer to this question with the trans cult and the surgeries, she like feels like it's not enough, I guess. She's like, I'll tell you. And you open the next chapter. And it's the true madness chapter. It's the trans women ruined everything chapter. Finally, suddenly they come back. Which was surprising after that she was like, no, trans women are the only true transsexuals, of course, and they're really rare. But then it comes back, and you want to know with what anecdote Shrier opens this?
sure.
So it's really short, and it goes like this. One time, my friend and her daughter went lingerie shopping to Nordstrom. It was supposed to be a very nice mother and daughter experience, but they came away shocked and appalled. When I inquired why, it turned out that the lingerie assistant was a man. And then it continues of like how the assistant was a cloaky trans woman, and that was horrible. That's it. Nothing else happened. Nothing happened. The trans woman did her job. Nothing else happens. But this is like the nail in the coffin that Abigail Shrier convinced will.
So the anecdote is my friend's daughter saw a tranny and that ruined her life.
Yes.
Yeah, damn, we are powerful. Okay, I gotta process. I gotta back up. Okay, so listeners, you have to understand that like this is the equivalent of like someone coming in and just like actively taking a dump on every single syllable you have ever typed out in your entire life. So like the amount of things Abigail Shrier gets wrong about gender, about socialization, about existing as a human being in the world, frankly. Because, like, what exactly do you mean? Okay, so the core of socialization theory or social reproduction theory is the very observable fact that, like, we are kind of immersed in the traditions, the culture, the language, the histories of the society around us. Like a society reproduces itself fairly informally as well. And like, it reproduces gender by teaching us how gender works. Constantly, you are not taught in classes at school, boys rule, girls rule. Teachers expect girls to do worse at math, and it becomes a self-fulfilling, self-reinforcing prophecy because they pay less attention to the girls. If the girls are struggling or slacking, then, it's like, oh, they're girls. Math and science isn't for them anyway, It is observable that, like, boys can do more, are allowed more license by their parents, have slightly greater capacity to misbehave or have a slightly wider range of acceptable behaviors. It's all about interacting with the social world around you and seeing, like, whether you get disciplined for doing something or not, about, like, pushing against these boundaries, testing them, internalizing them and accepting them, or internalizing them and not accepting them, and biding your time until you can wait, which is again a story that's probably quite familiar to queer kids. I don't get it. Like Abigail Shrier is like a conservative, like uber patriarchal natalist and all that, but like she shouldn't be like this stupid about patriarchy, right? Like an apologist for it. An apologist for it, certainly. A naturalizer of it, absolutely. But, like, how do you get gender is taught in schools?
Well, so at the end, when she's supposed to be providing solutions, she literally says that women are biologically different from men to a phrenological extent. She straight up does the whole male-female skeletons thing. And girls have different capacities than boys, but that's good. They're nurturing, they're nice, and we should teach them that that's good. Yes, we joke these misogynistic jokes, but when girls hear them, they don't understand that they're jokes. That's literally what she says, that adults are just having a little ha-ha about the inferiority of women, and they just don't understand that girls are taking it seriously when they shouldn't, because they're dumb.
She's boys will be boysing adults. Like, just, like...
She's boys will be boysing social reproduction theory, which is, again, not a sentence I expected to come out of my mouth on this podcast. Okay, sure.
So, this is Abigail Shrier's views on gender.
I don't think those are views on gender. I think that is like a train wreck of that has kind of been like amalgamated into the like written testimony of a deeply, deeply stupid person who like wouldn't recognize a feminist if one punched her in the face.
I mean, like
a cissexual one. Don't come after me. That was not a threat.
So this is Gender by Abigail Shrier. We're done talking about gender.
Oh, thank God.
Now it's time to talk about race. And George knows it.
Can I get out? Can I leave? Can I exit this?
I want off Abigail Shrier's wild ride.
No. Contractually obligated. I am the only white person here. Please stay.
Fucking like DEIing us into like giving opinions on Abigail Shrier's views on race. God.
Yes. And this isn't the last time you'll be doing this. No. Okay, so Gender by Abigail Shrier. Girls are stupid, vulnerable because they haven't been fucked behind Denny's enough, and they're easily suggestible by people on the internet.
Oh my God! And she was like, "This is jokes." She was like, "Okay, all right." Also, just joking about the inferiority of women, but you're like, but she herself is like, if you don't fuck teenage girls behind Denny's enough, they'll grow up to be sad and look at trannies and be too discouraged to be women. It's just like you think we're down on it? What do I say to that?
Yeah,
what do I say to that?
So like obviously now we're getting into comparing transition to cosmetic surgery, anorexia, and race corrective cosmetic surgery like monolith surgery and
I'm out.
Okay. You did not just say the words race corrective surgery to two patients.
Well, she doesn't name it, but like I have to name it something, right? She starts from the baseline that transition is the hacking away of feminine features. So girls that have been taught at school that being a girl is bad go on the internets and they hear that transition exists and it will hack away their feminine features. And by that logic, she compares it to stuff like monolith surgeries for Asian women and like rhinoplasties for Jewish women. So that's the rationale. There is a very obvious gap here, and that is the fact that, for example, a Jewish woman in an anti-Semitic society is probably oppressed for being visibly Jewish. Or, even like assumed to be visibly Jewish. Like, she's not having a happy fun time, right? And so she might feel compelled, or her parents might insist that she do this for her own good, to like do a rhinoplasty and get rid of like the hooked nose that is seen as indicative of Jewishness. But I want you to point me to one place in society that isn't Sock the Furry on Tumblr, where women are encouraged to have mastectomies.
I mean, that's the sort of like logical issue there, isn't it? That's where it kind of falls apart a little bit. They have to sincerely pretend that we live in a patriarchal society that makes women hate themselves and also easily enables and encourages them to get rid of their tits. Yeah, it's not a thing.
Obviously, in order to construct this argument, you have to create the impression that this place in society, Sock on the internet, that Sock on the internet is powerful enough to do this. And how you do it is by creating the specter of the trans cult, right? So it's all the greatest hits is that they love bomb you, they tell you that everything you're feeling is valid forever, they enable your self-destructive behaviors, and they ostracize you if you don't do as they say. That's roughly the gist. So basically, Shrier presents trans people on the internet as like almost a Scientology. Well, not the Scientology because we don't have money. And
I was going to say Amish.
Yeah, sure. And she has this fantastic quote. There's a point at which she rails against like a trans woman, I think marathon runner or something like that, or something to that effect. A trans woman athlete, saying that like if your parents abuse you and are not supportive, you can always cut them off. And she goes on like this whole rant, which she concludes with, sure, like have your queer found family. What's gonna happen when you have a heartbreak? Who are you gonna talk to? Who's gonna help you when you have a flat tire? Who's gonna help you when you're sick? Is your found family gonna do that? And I'm just sitting there like, Abigail?
Yes?
Have you never had a friend? What is this question? Who's gonna listen to you when you have a heartbreak? A friend?
This is the biggest self-own I've heard to this point. Jesus. What a way to admit that you've never felt affection from someone who wasn't actually blood related to you.
Yeah, I think Abigail Shrier straight up admitted that like no one who doesn't have a family obligation to her has ever wanted to be around her, and she thinks that this is she thinks this is a massive own of the queers somehow. I'm sorry, people like me.
Listen, I am borderline no contact with my parents. And the thing is, what these people do very cruelly is they point to financial and mental misfortunes of adults that are no contact with their family. It's particularly common outside the West, where family connections and like the social safety net literally is your family most of the time. It is expected to be. And when you don't have it, that's a really big problem. Right? And these people typically like leech off the misery of like children that disown their parents to prove a very cruel point, and that's basically what she's trying to say, is that you should allow your parents to do with you what you will, because otherwise you will be destitute. Like, it is very funny and it is a self-own, but like that is the point. That is the point that she's making. At first, she makes the point that you owe your parents your life in this sum of money. And then she says that if you disagree or you don't like what your parents are doing to you, too bad, because without them, you are destitute.
So, I mean, every step of the way, she's just very explicitly encouraging child abuse, right?
Yeah, oh, yes, yes.
Like that's just basically it. This is child abuse, the novel, more or less.
Apparently, the second book is even worse in that respect. I didn't read it, and I'm not going to. But I've been told that is kind of it.
One's enough, quite frankly.
The DLC.
Yeah.
Like this is the one that got pushed. This is the one that made an impact. I actually didn't even know that Shrier had a second book until you mentioned it right now. Let's keep it that way.
So in the second book, she went much harder on this and much more deranged. But Shrier in this book has a very particular sorting of good and bad doctors. And as I told you before, she has these like chapters of great men of sexology and psychiatry, and she's very much pro them. right? And she is really endorsing of the idea that it is the doctor who should be the decider of whether you transition or not. She advocates quite directly for total control of the doctors in this respect. When she talked about true transsexuals in the beginning, it was kind of apparent, but not as much as in the later chapters, that, dysphoria, transsexualism is a mental disorder for which transition is sometimes relief, and only the doctors have the power to determine whether it will be good relief.
Of course.
Hence her preoccupation with Zucker and Blanchard and stuff like that. However, she is flexible in whether transition should be allowed at all as well. For instance, she quotes Dr. McHugh, her interview with him, as saying this. This is a controversial view. Dr. Zucker, Blanchard, and Bailey, for instance, all believe sex reassignment surgery is worthwhile and salutary for at least some adult patients. The problem with gender surgery, according to Dr. McHugh, is not that it can never satisfy a patient or alleviate dysphoria. The problem is that doctors have no way of knowing who will be healed and who will be harmed by it. I know this, he told me, that some people are satisfied and live happily ever after. And some, of course, get suicidal, depressed, and regretful. And nobody can tell the difference between the ones in the beginning that will and will not regret it. So, the framing of this book of transition is one of severe intervention that is only justifiable if the doctor agrees you will be happy about it. And she has found herself a doctor that is saying that, well, we don't really know 100%, and so that means we should really withhold it for all. And another thing that this, sort of props up a bit silently is that because Shrier says, and this doctor says as well, that some patients are helped by SRS, and that some people are very miserable without it. And then gives an example, but some people are really miserable after it. When you take this sort of doctor as the ultimate authority as your given foundation, the patient becomes the doctor's responsibility once they enter into their care, right? Mm-hmm. So the doctor, if the patient is miserable after the surgery, that's the doctor's responsibility because he did the surgery. If the patient is miserable because they were denied surgery, that's not the doctor's responsibility. Therefore, regret after surgery always has more value than that regret of not getting the surgery, because one of them you can sue them for, and the other you can't.
I hadn't thought about the legal aspect of it, but
well, we are in America now. Well, not literally.
Yeah, true,
but,
right. Most litigious place on the planet. It's so interesting how you listen to someone who's dedicated essentially their life to gender surgery, like transition healthcare. But they won't say, but we would need more funding to research this to properly understand it. Of course they won't say it because they're disingenuous fucks. I feel like, especially when it comes to like talking about regret and medical regret, it makes more sense to research outcomes and try and get like decent sample sizes than it is to cut it off entirely, because you can't research something that you've cut off. I might be like the most layman person here, but like, I don't know. This is my take.
Here's the thing. That kind of thing would operate from the idea that transition and not transition are like equal outcomes, right? So you change your sex or you don't change your sex in some fashion, right? And then you either have your old sex or your new sex or whatever. And then you research outcome based on that. However, Shrier and these doctors that she cites, allegedly, like, I don't really trust her to represent interviews faithfully. I trust her that when she quotes somebody, it's what they really said, because that's something you could be sued for. But a slightly misrepresentative summary, not so much. So they all present transition as a kind of crutch, that truly passing as a different sex, which is a goal of transition, is really, really difficult because men and women are phrenologically different, so you would never be able to really do it. So it presents a constant psychological strain and a total dependency on extensive medical procedures. Therefore, they don't really present it as, well, you either transitioned or you have not. They present it as, you are either healthy or you are this miserable Sisyphus climbing up a hill with a giant rock, constantly being propped up by surgeons and syringes. That is the presentation they're making.
Okay, I have to make this joke. I'm legally obligated. More like Sisyphus.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. And, like, this is the bit that I warned you about in the beginning, that I'm going to warn the listener about, too. We are about to talk about trans suicide. It's gonna be horrible, because Shrier talks about it in a really horrible way. that is really exploitative. So there will be a timestamp in the description to when we are done. But anyway, without further ado, transition in this book is chiefly framed as suicide prevention.
Oi.
Shrier, basically, and this is explicit. This is not a my summary. Basically asserts that parents of trans teenagers are basically blackmailed. They're told that if you don't do this, if you don't do the pronouns, if you don't do that, your child will kill themselves. And then, of course, they do. And so she first writes a kind of really middling chapter on suicide where she just kind of doesn't say anything of value and is kind of offensive in and of itself. She mentions Leah Acorn, the trans girl that killed
Alcorn, I
herself.
think.
My
Oh, yeah,
God.
sorry.
Ghoulish.
And it's kind of
That's
just
crazy.
like that chapter is just kind of like, well, it's sad when it happens. Anyway, and she just continues. But then later, there is another chapter which is more in the section where she is extolling the virtues of Zucker and Blanchard et al. Later, there is a chapter where, like, well, you know, people that transition also kill themselves. So it seems suicide prevention is not that effective, is it? So where is the guarantee
Wow.
that transition will stop them from killing themselves?
I wonder if there is some kind of commonality between the experiences of a pre-transition individual and a post-transition individual that might contribute to a deterioration in mental health and material conditions and a certain despair and fear of a loss of autonomy that might drive a person, regardless of their transition status, to take that step. I wonder. It must be said, we live in a deeply transphobic society. And like, okay, I have a rant about this and I'll keep it short, but like this is in some ways a deep, deep failure of like the messaging around trans advocacy that is largely perpetuated by well-meaning cis allies who think they're doing a bang-up job by like focusing on trans suicide. But the way they focus on trans suicide is that they treat the condition of being trans as like an innate source of like deep distress. Like, I'm not denying trans people do suffer from a deep bodily distress. Like, you know, I spent 3 decades of my life with like an embodiment that wasn't the one that was right for me. There was a deep mismatch in what I should have been and what I was. However, I bet I would have had a lot less distress if I didn't live in a society that was so intent on punishing me for wanting to be a woman, for wanting to transition, for wanting to be a transsexual woman, for wanting to avail of this care. You know, if the cis-sexist society didn't make trans people's lives as hard as it did, if it didn't make accessing care as hard as it did, there would be a significantly lower amount of distress. And like that is the part of where like, you know, trans advocacy by mostly cis people, because it is mostly cis people talking about us and not to us doing this, who has just completely failed. It's this just complete like acceptance of transness as a pathology that like wrecks you. And like, you gotta get these kids, you gotta get these people their cure, otherwise their transness is going to kill them. And it's like, no. It's not the transness that's killing me. It's the society around my transness that is doing it. Like I'm not exaggerating when I say that every trans suicide is a social murder, because, you know, I don't really know if I would say that I was born in the wrong body. I'm quite happy with mine as it is now, but I was definitely born in the wrong fucking society. Sorry, that's my rant.
That's the thing with conservative, like, well, pundits is too strong a word.
Mhm.
Thinkers, I guess. They do think that they do find flaws in progressive rhetoric. Usually really mainstream progressive rhetoric. Because it's, you know, it's not that hard. And in this case, Shrier latches on to the idea that transition is justified by suicide. Not that people should be able to transition, but that we should let them transition because otherwise they're too miserable. And, you know, the thing is, I am way more sympathetic to flaws in ideology in like progressive rhetoric and with trans people, because at least they're usually coming from the fundamental axiom that everyone deserves to live, whereas Shrier is not. But she does, like I said, I remember I told you that she presents all the like pro-trans stuff in like a funny way, funny, like in a denigrating way. So, like, she interviews a pro-trans therapist for trans children, and I don't know how deliberate the framing is, but she does, find something that she latches onto. First of all, in the interview, at a certain point, the therapist says that, some children change their minds, some don't. We should accommodate them. And that's nice. And then a few paragraphs later, there is this quote, which is in quotes, so I'm reasonably sure they actually said this. And this is in response to a question of, like, what do you say to parents that are reticent to accept their trans child? And the therapist says, I tell them that we can't change the mind, so we have to change the body. That's sort of the nutshell. I would let them know that if someone identifies this way, it's pretty rare that they would change their mind. We have known that we can't socialize someone in or out of a gender. And, like, it is very striking to me that even, like, allies and therapists cannot let go of exterminationist rhetoric, is that we have to let them be because we can't fix them. And, like, the thing is, there is a possibility that this therapist said this as, like, well, I have to convince these parents somehow to not hurt their child, so I will speak their language kind of way. So, like, possibly this therapist doesn't actually believe this in that phrasing, but it's something that I find very often. That, like, well, we just can't change them. This is my 9/11. Honestly, it's I hate it. I hate it. It's because there is always the implied thing that if we could change their mind, we would. Of course, here Shrier latches onto the contradiction that the therapist says that some people change their minds, and later says that the unchangeability of their minds, the general unchangeability of their minds, is what justifies transition. So obviously she latches onto that as a contradiction. But, like, in order to say that, you have to believe that existence after transition is categorically worse than the existence of someone who doesn't transition. Otherwise, it would not need justifying. So, with that, we're done talking about suicides, and we're on to lurid descriptions of surgeries. I'm not gonna read any. I'm not. But we're gonna talk about surgeries and detransition together. The end of the book ramps up in terms of rhetoric and vitriol. Shrier spends multiple chapters luridly describing every single thing. First testosterone, then top surgery, and then phalloplasty and metoidioplasty. And when I say lurid, it is. Sometimes I just skipped it, because I know what she was gonna say, and it wouldn't have made a difference whether I read it or not. There are a few funnies in there, like the fact that Shrier seems like she obviously, like, she's ad-libbing a lot of stuff, and she's just, like, pounding the rhetoric down. So I don't assume that every single thing there is researched. Like she says things that are falsifiable, like the fact that exogenous testosterone makes someone with XX chromosomes twice as likely to have a heart attack than a cis man, which it doesn't. It's not true.
Oh my god.
It's not true.
Okay, like, can I just add onto that specifically, just to demonstrate the in dishonesty? What testosterone does is that it will raise your risk of cardiovascular problems to the same level of a cisgender man. That's it. That is all that it does. It is very similar to, like, and the inverse for I'm assuming the inverse as well for whatever. I know estrogen increases your risk of breast cancer. I'm assuming that it's not any different to a woman who does not have a genetic predisposition to get breast cancer. Like, that's it. It just makes you more similar. I hate this piece of misinformation so much, but I hate the one about ovarian cancer even more, because that personally affected me.
I know that you said so in our interview, but you've said that,
Oh,
if
yeah.
I recall, that, like, the only reason you were really rushing to get a hysterectomy is because you were scared of cancer.
I was scared. So for the listeners, I had a variety of surgeries, but I was part of the last cohort of Dutch trans people to be sterilized. And I was made aware of the potential risk of ovarian cancer if I stayed on testosterone. Did not, like, if I stayed on testosterone, I was going to get cancer. That was the short of it. So basically 6 months after I had top surgery, I went in for an oophohysterectomy, because I was like, that's not going to happen to me. Now I know that that's a piece of, a whole crock of shit, honestly. And that has hurt me quite personally, because now I am infertile, obviously. But it hurts me that the reason for my infertility is that the misinformation peddled by the people who specifically want to stop other people from transitioning is part of the thing that pushed me into getting a procedure that was ultimately unnecessary for me. I have a lot of beef with TERFs over this, or, like, just transphobes in general. It's disgusting. and it doesn't help anyone to peddle misinformation.
The thing is, there is new research that is better, but like Shrier says this. She says that trans activists claim it only raises the risks to those of cis men, but I found this one study I can reference, and I will. And that's what she does. She doesn't just lie. She also says like trans activists may say this that sounds reasonable, but here's this one shit study. And not only like, because here's the thing, I'm not a science denier, and while I'm sympathetic to people that were deeply hurt by medical malpractice and fall into like complete science denialism, right? But science is just a thing in society, and it's prejudiced against marginalized people. And that's why you have to apply a bit of a scientific method to the science when it comes to trans people. Also, as a fun aside, Shrier, when she was describing metoidioplasty, she was like really emphasizing how it will never be a real penis. And in doing so, she accidentally committed a bit of a really funny fumble.
Okay.
She said that it can't get hard,
Ah.
which
Uh-huh.
Abigail, I'm sorry to let you know. You know what? It's fine.
Now, I don't have personal experience with this, but I know that
Don't you?
I mean, for a certain value of personal experience, I do have personal experience with this, and I'm just like, honey, that's just not true. Like, what else is there to say? I mean, that's just kind of like emblematic of the entire thing, right? Instead of like actual accurate information, instead of like any honest attempt to actually understand our altered biology, instead of any research as to how some of this could actually help us in ways that aren't even necessarily related to dysphoria, it's all just scaremongering and, what about the womb bin? What about the womb bin? And the non-womb bin. I'm gonna quote you, Emma. If all the bitches go crazy, who will make the babies?
Basically. Then we go into the detransition chapter. Here's the thing. Before the detrans chapter, I have not quite felt how manipulative Shrier is. So in the mastectomy chapter, she talks about the possible reversal of it through breast reconstruction. And she goes to great length to talk about how these are not real breasts. They have a different structure, and the nipples do not have erotic sensation. And she, through a quote from a doctor, says that having a mastectomy and removing the erotic sensation of the breasts is tantamount to voluntarily blinding yourself.
I don't think it is.
Sure need my nipples to see around me, Jesus. I just want to also point out that this is essentially lambasting detransition healthcare.
Yes.
Which I think if you were a detrans person who was, I don't know, for some weird reason trying to find comfort here, this would only make you feel worse. My God. Again, this is personal. It's a detransition chapter. I actually would like to get reconstructive surgery at some point in the future. I've never been helped by a single transphobe at the same time telling me that whatever I would get post-reconstruction is not going to be real anyway. I'm sorry, you're just giving people another avenue for them to constantly feel deep regret and never actually experience the healing that they can have, divorced away from whatever this mess is of an understanding of gender and, oh God, child rearing.
Medicine
she
and
does
teenage sex and just all sorts of horrible
Like,
things.
Getting
again,
fucked behind Denny's.
She does in this chapter. She literally says that getting mastectomy and then getting breast reconstruction is the same as gouging out your eyes and replacing them with glass eyeballs.
Okay, I'm just going to say it now, and this is a joke. Don't come for me. This is illegal. It's legal for me to make this joke. It's on site, Abigail. If I ever catch you. If I ever catch you.
Yeah, and then this is why I said she's manipulative. And then she goes into a couple of detrans stories, which, first of all, they have the same format as the trans stories, the ones that I, paid $1 billion for the angel to grow me a third leg. Those ones. They are the same in structure, but they are from the perspective of the detrans child, not the parents. And when parents are spoken of, it is usually in a negative light. They are not super duper negative, but therefore as absent parents. conservative parents, restrictive parents,
Wait,
that
she
kind of sense.
badmouths
And they're
conservative parents? That I wasn't expecting,
kind
but
of
okay.
like so okay, conservative is more my framing. It is like strict. Like she specifically mentions like Polish immigrants that are really like strict and emotionally distant.
Okay,
that kind
sure,
of thing.
of course. Let's squeeze a little anti-white racism in there at the end there. Why not?
So yeah, she does that, and then there is this like really saccharine couple of pages that are like inspo porn for detrans women that are like, you can do it. It's never too late to detransition. The rumors of your death were greatly exaggerated. I'm not making that up. That's in the book. And, yes, some changes will not revert by themselves, but there is laser and surgeries for that. And I'm like,
Yeah, there's same surgeries that you.
After going on this entire tirade about it's going to be so horrible if you have to avail of them, she's like, but you should detransition and avail. Like, wow, lovely.
first of all, this is
Thanks,
stupid.
lady.
This is stupid. Like,
Mhm.
this is just stupid. Like, do one or the other. And they're so close to each other, too. Like, there's barely, like, 2 chapters separating them. Like, have a brain
Like,
cell.
So something strange happened recently in the Dutch Parliament, and I say recently when it was probably like 8 months ago. But
Okay.
the probably most socially conservative religious party in the government, the SGP, not AGP, they specifically had their speaker take the floor to speak out for the essential need for detrans healthcare. And I was like, damn, I'm the most visible detrans person in the Netherlands. I have never talked to this guy in my life. Like, I don't know if there was such a big push for detrans healthcare within this particular party. I mean, I would assume that they would have done some outreach, but no. And I'm just begging if you. Like, I would ideally want people to be in favor of trans healthcare, obviously, but if you're not going to do that, at least be somewhat fucking compassionate towards the detransitioners. Otherwise, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. Like, you want to win people over to your side, you're just going to make them feel like shit, make them feel even worse. Then they can be martyrs for your movement. Like, I'm sorry. It's sickening. It's sickening.
Yeah, ultimately, it's not about the happiness of the detransitioners either, right? Because like they need these regret narratives. They need these if it bleeds, it leads sort of things. That's just what the entire propaganda depends on.
No, it's all about propping up what was it? The Christo-fascist white nationalism, essentially. Like that's what it is. It's all about fertility, it's all about patriarchy, it's all about controlling people's bodies, no matter what they want to do with them.
Yeah, and like this is basically the end of the book. The last bit of the book is like Shrier
Thank
giving a 10-point
God.
instruction to, I don't remember if there's actually 10 points, something like that, to parents what to do with your trans children. And it's like take away their phones,
Oh,
send
no.
them to a horse farm, whatever.
Of course, we had to end
They
with
go to the
even more
ranch.
child abuse. Oh God. You know, the United States has like a couple of organizations that like do things like that. You can get your trans child or queer child just kidnapped and sent to a horse farm, whatever it is, out of the countryside to have, I guess.
This is, by the way, a real
the straightness
example.
beaten
This is
into them.
not, I'm not,
Yeah.
it's not a funny, this is not a funny, this is a real example from the book.
What?
Like, parents
God.
sent a child to a horse farm and now she's not trans anymore, whatever. This is a cited example, so it's not a funny I'm making up.
That is insane.
You know, it's not something that like people who are outside the West like even really know about, because like, you know, you talk about like the United States, there's all this land of the free propaganda, but like actually they have like the most cracked things that they just allow parents to do to their kids. It's wild, truly.
No, but you know what's the funny thing? One of the things that I remember really vividly my parents saying to me, which by the way, they did all these things, but like remove my computer,
Oh, dear.
socially isolate me, never allow me to talk to the same people that I talked to before again. Like they did all that. Like chant to me for hours on end that I'm delusional and stuff like that, and that I've just got it all too wrong, and I've never been masculine, and like it's actually not that bad to be a woman and stuff like that. Like they did all that. But also I remember really vividly at some point them yelling at me that there is no child protective services here. You're not in fucking America. We can do what we want to you. Jesus.
Yeah.
Controversially, children are people. Man, like
That's really controversial. Incredibly controversial.
it is very controversial.
Kids having agency? Perish the thought.
Wild.
Right. Things like Shrier, they really rely on the idea that children and teenagers included cannot have a perception of reality because they might change their mind in the future and their minds are really motile. And, there is children perhaps change more than most, but like by the token, adults also can't make up their minds, right?
Hmm.
And Shrier says so because she says 18 is too young.
No one can ever make up their minds. Free will is an illusion.
I want to know what Abigail thinks is the appropriate age for someone to get married, actually.
Probably like 12.
Well, they can
No,
get pregnant really
I'm
young,
serious.
so
I'm so serious because, like, I've heard of, like, people comparing transition to, like, marriage.
Hmm.
Social transitioning is almost like dating, and then, like, you have quote unquote full commitment of, like, medical things. And it's like, well, yeah, you could divorce, detransition, you can retransition, get back together again. But, like, adults make these decisions as well. Like, they have a certain idea of how things are going to be, and then they turn out not to go that way. No one bats. Okay, maybe the white Christian suburban moms will have a fit over it, but, like, generally speaking, we're just like, yeah, divorce happens. But and people can have really deep, deep regrets about their previous marriages, but, like, you don't see people screaming about that in nearly the same way.
no, yeah, and like the
Yeah.
thing that because I am pursuing, like, as a detrans woman, I am pursuing a reconstructive surgery, and what's made it really clear to me is that desire comes from a place of discomfort, right, with a gendering of a part of my body. But what makes me miserable about it is that, for a variety of reasons, I am discriminated against in the employment market, and I can't hold a stable job, which means, even though it's not the most expensive surgery in the world, it's very difficult for me to afford it. It's if I could just have it, I would have so little angst about it. And Shrier, like, obviously, like I said, they frame transition like in this way, and then like they have to avoid talking about the parallels between detransition and transition. So she says, for example, that the trans cult claims that all your problems will disappear when you transition. And also, by the way, she quotes Alex Bertie, the trans man YouTuber, saying, "Transition didn't solve all my problems." And then he says something to the effect that it just made them easier to deal with or something like that. She literally quotes that and still asserts multiple times that that's the delusion they sell you, right? And then in the detrans chapter, they says, well, yes, these girls, of course, still had their problems after the transition, but at least they had clarity about their sex. At least they had clarity.
I'm sure.
Does this? No, she does not. I was going to ask, does she have listening comprehension skills? But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's her irreversible damage. Mommy's tantrum for 375 pages. Well, a bit less than that. Some of that is reference.
I'm sorry you had to suffer through that, first and foremost.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I skimmed some of that.
Well, good. I mean, like,
Good for your sanity.
Especially the parent testimony. I got so fucking sick of them.
Yeah, probably the 6th time she was like, poor Babathy,
I think there was more than 6 of them. But, like, just for psychic damage to you, Talia, one of the parent testimonies is about Indian parents of a trans child.
Okay, shoot me.
And then at the end of the book, there is like a section called an update. And that is basically she follows up on, I don't know, some or all of the trans children that she talks about and summarizes their respective fates. Most of those children, not much occurs. Some of them, like, trans men are now non-binary. Others still don't talk to their parents or whatever. Like, you've been in the trans community. You know, like, what's up. The Indian one goes something like this. It's quite short. That the parents decide to move back to India
Oh my
to
god.
throw away all that progressive nonsense. And, their child has stopped insisting that she's trans and even wears skirts sometimes. So reconnecting with traditional Indian culture has cured her.
All right, I'll leave it up to you how much of this you want to like actually leave in the final cut. But
Okay, the mic just gave up. I assume you screamed.
okay, I gotta talk. We clearly have to
Okay.
talk about how Abigail Shrier instrumentalizes race. Okay, so thank you, Abigail Shrier, for like informing us that a trans child was dragged back to the hell patriarchy that I fought tooth and nail to escape all my life. Great, wonderful, love knowing that. I guess we kind of like skipped past this earlier because we were busy with all the rest of the insanity. She was just constantly vomiting at us. Like, there was just like so much. Sometimes it's just like hard to actually even comment on everything. But but like the comparison of like transition to cosmetic surgeries and like specifically these like fads, right? So first of all, conservatives do this a lot. They think they're incredibly clever about like, the progressive discourses on both race and gender. I've seen a lot of people be like, oh well, if gender is a social construct, then race is a social construct. Why can't you be transracial? Have a whole essay on that. It's a really silly argument, very easy to defeat. But the primary thing that I notice over here is that she demonstrates this very basic understanding, presumably because like I believe Abigail Shrier is Jewish. If I'm wrong, correct me. But like she demonstrates this very basic understanding that like the society around you can stigmatize you, can like stigmatize parts of who you are and make you feel a particular way about them, can like complicate the relationship that you have to your own body because of the way it is perceived by others. And I don't know, I think it just amazes me that she never digs deeper into that, or is not really any more curious about that, except for, just the most superficial sense of like thing bad and thing similar to other thing that I think also bad. Therefore, I can use one thing to demonize the other. And it just like that is the entire book, right? Just like throwing the kitchen sink, just instrumentalizing as much epistemic authority and crackpots and like quote unquote experts that she can summon onto her side. Just like whatever argument will work, just all aggregated into this soup with absolutely no regard, no care, and frankly no interest in the deeper implications of literally any single topic that she touches upon. Because what she fundamentally is like, she her qualifications are like opinion writer for the WSJ for 2 years. Like she has a philosophy degree and went to law school, and she wants to like address these like great breadths of topics that she has not investigated anymore past I should have total domain over my child's body. I should get to define their feelings towards their own body. And if I can't define those feelings, if I can't convince and browbeat my child, then I still get the final say anyway. That's it. That is the singular obsession. There is no deeper thesis to this book than I own my child. Fuck you.
So yeah, that was a ride. How are we feeling?
Incredibly happy that neither of my parents read this book.
I think I can like safely speak for both Lucy and myself when I say that like, we got absolutely flashbanged by this book, by everything you told us about it, and I don't think I would wish the actual like ordeal of reading it upon anyone. But like at the same time, it is both unfortunate and true that if you want to understand the GC movement, if you want to understand the core of it in its modern incarnation, you need to understand this book, and unfortunately, you need to understand Abigail Shrier. You need to understand why this is the id of the gender critical movement, why this is its animating drive and its focus. It is the anxiety of parents who, even the well-meaning ones, even the progressive ones, just absolutely terrified at losing control over their child's life, or like even when not phrased in terms of control, even when they want to respect their child's autonomy. Right? It's preying on their worst fears that if they're good progressive parents who allow their child to transition, well, what if your child regrets it and you allowed that to happen and you are actually the monster because you listened to a trans cult? Like the narrative is like when you
Yep.
lay it out and when you go into the guts of it, it's all absurd and nonsensical, and it's very clear just how much of a quack, frankly, a clown, an entire circus Abigail Shrier is. However, the one thing she's good at is zeroing in on those fears and just like hitting with a hammer.
Yep, this book is the fear machine because it's like it doesn't make sense. Like the things she says are demonstrably false to most people.
Contradictory, too.
Yeah, like it's especially like the alleged progressive parents, like the kind of thing school taught them gender stereotypes. What is this? Like
But
you
it
don't
doesn't
need
have to
to.
be true, right? Because a parent
Yeah.
reading this book is not going to be like using their like, well, I would hope actually that like some parents will use their like facts and logic machine in their skulls while when reading this book, but like it's really that
Mhm.
emotional appeal, that part where she is like, I talked to a lot of scared parents. I collected all these testimonies. I have witnessed how the trans cult has ruined the lives of children. And now Baba C will never walk on 3 legs ever again. That's fucking irreversible damage.
On that note, Lucy, where can the good people find you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to plug?
I do. My TikTok, for one. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at Lucy Kartikasari without the Y.
Absolutely. Anyway.
Check me out if you want to hear more about a detrans experience.
Yep, yeah, please do check Lucy out. For my own part, when I first came across Lucy's TikTok, I was like, oh my god, this is like the first thing I've heard about detrans experiences that actually like makes sense. Like straight up.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Cracked Ivory is supported by Patreon. Join us at patreon.com/crackedivorypod to receive early access to our episodes, as well as full Patreon exclusive episodes and behind-the-scenes content. Follow Talia Bad at taliabad.com and Emma Zacharuk at dolphindiaries.card.co for their solo feminist projects. Cracked Ivory is edited by Emma Zacharuk and produced by Talia Bad and Emma Zacharuk. All music is by Kevin MacLeod. Special thanks to our current Cum Laude's patrons: Lava Monster, White Mirror, Axon.dev, and Ceiling Fan. Thanks for listening.